Hello, this is Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony. Welcome back. I'm going to do another one of these screen sharing episodes, I guess you can call it. I wanted to touch base here. It's August 5th, 2020, about just before 2 p.m. Pacific time. And I wanted to follow up and move forward from my previous videos if you have seen them. If you have not, I would recommend watching at least the last two or three to understand where we're at now. Okay. So I have the chart in front of us for the momentary chart. So we see the sun is in Leo and the cluster of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, all retrograde. It's why they're red, and they're right up here in Capricorn. And we have the main player, the main theme for today, Mars in late Aries. It is in its shadow. The retrograde is coming up, but it has not gone retrograde yet. That'll be September 9th. And what it's going to do in the process during the whole period of the retrograde, September, October, November, and actually into December is going to last. It's going to form a square. You can already see it coming together. It's not exact yet, but that square is coming together. And I talked about this in the previous videos, 2 or 3 videos ago. I think one was in mid-June, one was in early May, and then the one in mid-March, right when the lockdown started. Those are the three most important ones for understanding what I'll be talking about here. But anyway, just to recap, where we've been. So the last time I checked in was right within about 24 hours of when Mars and Neptune were conjunct. So there's Neptune at 20 degrees Pisces, there's Mars. It's a whole sign away now. But if we go back a couple of months, go up to a few days, I think it was something like the 12th or 13th, I believe. It's right around there where my last video was. But that's when Mars and Neptune were conjunct. And I had the suspicion even before that in early May, you might have heard me mention it, that I suspected that even though the lockdowns would lift throughout the month of May, and that I attributed that to these planets that were moving direct in Capricorn now moving retrograde, and that would loosen up the pressure essentially. And it happened, but I suspected at that time in early May that when we got to mid-June, that this aspect might have to do with some level of deception. And that's the Pisces, Neptune, with Mars kind of being like an underhanded action when it's in that sign or connected to Neptune. So there was some potential there. And when I checked in June, it was just starting. We were kind of the protests slash riots were just past their peak and starting to come down at that point. And that was in the news and was kind of taking away from all the COVID coverage. But if you were paying attention at that time, they were just starting to talk about increased cases, right? And since then, we've been told, oh, those cases are going to turn into deaths. They're going to turn into deaths. And it hasn't really manifested in the way that we've been told. And it's been here in a month and a half now, a little bit more. And it's about 2-week incubation period. So these cases really haven't turned out much in the way of illness and death, which is good. That's a good thing. But the media keeps pushing the cases. Whereas prior to the protests and riots that started in late May, the COVID coverage was always about the daily death count. That was coming down very fast at that time. There was a distraction, obviously, in the news at that time, and so we got off the topic. But when we got back on the topic, right in the midst of this potential deception, now we weren't talking about deaths anymore, just cases. And it's all that fear behind what the cases could mean, right? And that could happen. And we don't see it on the ground here. And a lot of that has to do with just the natural way that viruses work. Summertime, they're not deadly in the summer. All viruses bottom out in the summer in terms of death rate. It'll probably rise, more. There'll probably be an accurate assessment of the rise in deaths here when we get into like October, November, because that's normal as well. And if the virus is still going around, you'll expect deaths to peak. But if it's anything like it was in the previous peak, it's the same, same groups that are, that are at risk essentially, that are being targeted by the virus as far as death goes. So, anyway, but point being that in June, this started. And I thought it would be a small little flare up of the potential deception, but it's lingered here for a couple of months almost. And you just wonder how long they're going to go with the cases without really showing how that's leading to the same amount of deaths as it was back in April, say, when everything was peaking. Okay. But anyway, so I also mentioned in that video that Mars would move into Aries, and it's going to be in Aries for a while. So Mars has been in Aries for a few weeks now, and it's not going anywhere until January. And that's because of the retrograde. We're going to see Mars retrograde and go up a couple months. So this is a few days from now. It can go right around there. I think it's the 9th. Yeah, September 9th is when Mars goes retrograde. So there it is. It's in the black ink on the 9th, and then if you go one more day, it's red. So now it's about to move backwards right around that time. And so that is when I think the real action is going to come into play here. A lot of everything that has to do with this square. So this is going to set itself up here in August. It's already starting. So if we go back to right now, there's Mars at 20 degrees. So it's literally just did a square, its first square to Jupiter, just in the last couple of days. And this thing is flickering. So I think I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, because that's annoying. But anyway, so it started already with this cluster of planets in Capricorn, the squaring aspect of it. So just the last couple of days, it squared Jupiter. And what did we have here yesterday on the 4th? This crazy video that a lot of us have seen. I don't know how there were any survivors anywhere within like a 3-block radius of this explosion in Beirut, Lebanon. Very, very odd explosion. Had very nuclear-like signal to it. Nuclear-like, I can't say it was, but it had a mushroom cloud. It had that rapid horizontal spread at the surface, like you see. Very much smaller in scale than a nuke would be, but I'm not an expert in military weaponry. Who knows what there is out there? Maybe there are mini nukes. I don't know, but that looked pretty frightening. That and that happened here with Mars and Aries, fiery Aries. Mars, the planet of war, and it's squaring Jupiter. So, and Jupiter is in Capricorn, which has to do with like governments and decision making and things like that. And there's tension in that part of the world, especially between Israel and Lebanon. And we don't know yet what exactly happened, accident or, bombing, or we don't know. But it didn't look like a fireworks facility just exploded. It did not appear that way. We don't know the details yet, so we won't speculate. But point being, that's very aligned with this energy, this Mars in Aries squaring and getting amplified by Jupiter. Okay. That is what we would expect almost, and it gets it's only going to get, I guess, worse here if that's an indicator of what we're in for. We got Pluto on the dock for next week. I think it's around the 13th or so. Yeah, Mars will be at 23 degrees. There's Pluto, so that's again the first of a few squares that it's going to make to Pluto over the next several months. And then we got Saturn, which is, I think, is going to be like a week later. Yeah, just about a week later. 21st of August. Actually more like 22nd or 20th or 23rd. We'll find it. There it is. That's roughly close enough. But you get it over the next couple of weeks. We're at the 5th right now. So in the next two to 3 weeks, Mars is setting up those squares with all 3 of those planets. And so this is kind of go time. This is what I just has all the energy of a battle. Okay. And that bombing yesterday has the characteristics of that, whether accident or intentional. That's the energy of this kind of a battle, and the whatever you want to call them, the globalists, the globalist special interest groups that want nothing more than to destroy America and have everyone live under one roof under the UN as far as global governance goes. They want nothing more than to use this election to put someone in office that will comply with that. And there's a lot of desperation going on right now between now and the election. Is it even going to happen, right? We talked about this in the last couple of videos, where on November 3rd, if we go there, we have Mercury right there. It will be stationary direct. In other words, it will be going direct. I think we just go up a couple hours, I think. That's noon. By that evening, I believe. There it is. So by 4 p.m. Pacific, now Mercury is gone as far back as it's going to go in the retrograde it will be having then, and it's going to be going direct that day. But also we have Mars, which is as far back as it will be going in its retrograde. that will be coming up. Like we said, starts September 9th. It goes to the 13th. But you notice it's at 15 degrees Aries even on the 3rd, and it's still there on the 13th when it actually starts to move forward. And I think that's a few hours into that day. It'll turn black. There it is. And so Mars turns direct midday, mid to late day on the 13th. So 10 days after the election. So this just screams, the two of these just scream delays and unusual circumstances. Not smooth would be the two words to sum it up. Not smooth at all. And now that we have all the talk about mail-in ballots and what that entails, I mean, that ultimately leads to delays. It's the downside. If you have to do mail-in, the downside is it causes delays because you have to count them all, and they don't all come in at once. So there is a downside to it. So if we do it, fine, but we have to be prepared for the delays. So that could be part of it. But there could also be, other underhanded actions, like, I'd hate to say, a coup of some kind. But when we talked about Mars retrograde in Aries in general a couple of videos ago, we'll reiterate that again. This really is, Mars likes to be direct. It doesn't want to be indirect, and it's in its own sign. When it's backwards in Aries, it can be a lot of underhanded action and not so much above board. So this is things like internal strife, like civil strife. I mentioned Antifa specifically back in March, and then they popped up in May as part of this whole year of craziness. And they probably are not going away. So the idea of domestic terrorism in whatever form being a part of it here the next few months due to this Mars retrograde, and the fact that it'll be making those squares up to Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, okay? And when it comes to when this will end, when that square will end, we talked about it'll be next week when Mars first contacts Pluto. And so Pluto will be the planet that it finishes with first. And that'll happen in 2020. And it happens right at the end of the year, like literally right around the solstice. Okay, so there it is again. So now Mars making its final square to Pluto, and it'll be moving along. But notice at that point, I mentioned this a couple of videos ago, or last video as well, Jupiter and Saturn joining each other as they cross the threshold from Capricorn to Aquarius. So Mars will make its squares to Saturn and Jupiter while they're in Capricorn, but when it finally makes a square to them again, they will have moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. And so it won't happen until something like a month later. So I think it's more like early January for Saturn. There's Mars at 6 degrees, and like late January, like early to mid January for Saturn, and mid to late January for Jupiter. And so it's going to be finishing up here at the beginning of 2021, and with different signs. So with Taurus to Aquarius rather than from Aries to Capricorn. And so this has, looking at this from the big picture perspective of, what's going to happen, what's going to unfold, how is this working out? We're in the battle, like I said, right now. And it's not just a battle for ideology, it's a battle for information, right? And so there's lots of information going around right now. And what I found interesting was when Mars entered its shadow last week, it literally within hours of Mars entering its shadow was when those doctors came on and were talking about hydroxychloroquine, okay? And talking about their experience using it, not just speculating that it could work, but talking about how it has worked. And all the media outlets, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all took it down. They're private companies, they can put up things or take down things what they want. But why would that be taken down? We talked about, if you remember, going back to April. Let's go back to April, what was going on. It was in like very late April. When I saw this is when Mercury, and go one more day, right around there. Yeah, Mercury was making a square to Pluto. Okay, where is it? Right about there. So it's Mercury 26 degrees Aries to Pluto. And so it's the same square that Mars is going to be making to Pluto here over the next several months, from basically next week until just before Christmas. And so to me, when I saw this, I thought, well, whatever information's coming through right now, which was in late April, I imagine the action toward that will be carried out from August to December. And my guess was that since what was coming out here was when Trump was being lambasted for being such an idiot for mentioning using UV therapy, right? And which is something that exists for disinfecting viruses and bacteria. It's not new, but he discussed it on the stage with Dr. Birx and basically forced Dr. Birx to have to mention it, right? And that was kind of a strategy, was to get her to mention that. Oh yeah, there are treatments that might work that we're exploring. So the idea of alternative treatment outside of the narrative of vaccine was what I thought these 3 months from August to December, so really almost 4 months, will be about. And lo and behold, as soon as Mars entered the shadow, first thing we see is hydroxychloroquine, which is another option, another treatment option that's outside of the narrative of waiting for a vaccine. And so that came up literally right away when Mars entered the shadow zone of its upcoming retrograde. And then almost immediately it was taken down. And so that it has that essence of the battle. Okay, so we got information battle going on. So I expect to see a lot more of this, a lot more doctors coming out. And again, it's not about speculating what could work; it's about showing what did work. And this is going to make people really question, like, why are they blocking this information from us? What? And so it's going to be a real battle between mainstream narrative drivers and the reality on the ground in the field coming to bear its fruit. Basically, it's going to be happening in front of our faces. It's going to be pretty intense. And with that explosion that we saw yesterday, I'm starting to wonder if war might be part of this battle, as well. So it's battle of information, there's battle of ideology, and who knows if that is going to manifest itself as a physical battle, and it very well could. All the energy is there, and it could be that it's what you could call a false flag, which means it is happening, but it could be done for other purposes, for distraction, or for leading people down a different path, etc. Because those things have been done before, and they'll obviously, if they've been done before, they could be done again. And so we have to just be careful that we're interpreting information correctly as it's in front of us. But back here to the now period. So here's Mars again. It's going to be approaching those squares up there, and it really is the last chance, the last hoorah or Hail Mary pass that the globalist special interests have in getting Trump out of office, because he is in the way. He really is. He was not supposed to win. By their plans, Hillary was going to take the U.S. and drive it into the ground. And if you don't agree with that, well, disagree. But that was really what energetically was going on. Somehow it got interrupted, and they've been trying to get him out of office ever since. And like I said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And my enemy is the globalist special interests that are trying to overtake not only the country, but the world. And someone like Trump or whoever it is, doesn't matter who it is, if they can disrupt that, to me, that's a good thing. And that's going to be the battle here, is the battle between what is good for humanity, which is like liberty, not just in the US, but all over the world, and what is in the best interest of those at the top, basically, for how they're going to use humanity. And so this is a war on many levels. And like I said, we can already see it in the information battles and the ideological battles, and there's riots and there's constant protests, and now it's actually changing to protests for saving the children, if you're not familiar. And so that's another ideology, which really everyone, I don't know how you can't be on board with trying to stop child trafficking, but the idea is that this is, pushing for an end to this. And in order to push for an end to it, you have to get those that are involved in it to be exposed and put away. And we're already seeing, what a year ago would have been considered conspiracy theory fodder, which is the idea of, Hollywood elites or people in the entertainment industry being involved in something like human trafficking. And, it's really, reputations are starting to kind of melt away right now. And we don't have all the details and all the who's who, but someone like Ellen, who's so wonderfully loved, is suddenly being exposed as not being all that lovable, right? Doesn't mean we're tying her to the human trafficking, but that could be a lead-in. It's an energy of opening our eyes to the reality of people. And and part of why some people wouldn't want to even believe that human trafficking or that there would be involvement with Hollywood elites in human trafficking is because they think of these people as such good people. And so the Ellen thing could just be a way of opening people's eyes to the possibility that there could be evil going on in that at that level of of fame and notoriety. Not that she is specifically, but she could have a role in helping with that energetically. But anyways, all this stuff is coming up, and it's a wonder that there haven't been protests about that before, you know. And there's like something like 800,000 children go missing in every year in the U.S. 800,000 per year. So in like that means in like 3 months, it's like 200,000. And when you think of that, think of how many people have died from COVID since early May, which is 3 months ago, and I mean, that was past the peak. So it's probably something like 50 or 60,000 in the last 3 months, maybe. I think most of it was, you know, prior to that. Could be off, but either way, it's much less than 200,000. There haven't even been 200,000 total deaths in the U.S. And so it's an amazing that the number is as high as it is when the focus, right? If we think the media is supposed to be focusing on important issues, where are they on this one? Where is if journalists were paid to use their curiosity and not paid to just cover stories they're forced to cover, then the true curiosity of journalists would be digging into the who's who and all of that. But I think this is going to be another topic of battle here. And again, if you've taken advantage of your position of notoriety and thought you could get away with this and thought it wasn't even you didn't even think of it as an evil act, or you know, because you think you're better than the rest of the cattle or something, which is, you know, the elitist kind of self-important um, perception essentially. But now there's this threat to that, or to your goodness, to the what the world, how the world sees you. You're going to want to fight and prevent that from happening. You're absolutely going to want to fight and prevent that from happening. And you know, love him or hate him, when it comes to human trafficking, Trump has been, you know, huge in creating situations and improvements to that end. So I think he's donating all kinds of money now to trafficking victims, and counseling and housing, and you know, all the things that basically lead to some going back into trafficking, because sometimes that's all they know. If they don't have a home and they don't have counseling, it's kind of hard to really get back into real life. And so these are all important steps to getting that, to finishing that, and you know, reducing the number of people who run back to it essentially as all they know. And so this is also another reason why celebrities are all one-sided politically. We think it's because they, like, you know, they're good people who want good things, and Trump is the devil, right? He's the Antichrist, or whatever you want to call him, and we're all supposed to get behind what is really globalist special interests when we really break it down. And this is, if that's your intention, and your plans are falling apart right now, it's not going to go down quietly. And so that's really what this last part of the 2020 is going to be. If we, you know, think of the first part of 2020 as the warm up for the discord, and think of the remainder of 2020 as really what 2020 is going to be remembered for. Okay, and it's going to be a combination of the virus and the lockdowns, and protests and riots, and people being outed, and action being done, you know, criminal indictments and things like that, and people trying to prevent that, and create distraction stories, and there could be potential physical war going on at the same time. It just looks like, not to sound negative, but just to sound realistic, it looks like quite the battle getting underway. I mean, when it comes to indictments and things like that, we know that Hillary Clinton will be sitting down on September 9th, which is the day that, remember, that's the day that Mars goes retrograde, starts its retrograde. It's September 9th. So she's sitting down and, I guess, having to testify about her emails going way back. Okay. Also, Ghislaine Maxwell, from what I heard, it's something like mid to late September is when she is going to be kind of on, you know, in the hot seat essentially. And you know, who knows what else is going on at that time. But that Mars retrograde from September 9th to November 13th, just after the election, is going to be an incredibly tense period of panic and in desperation, and not necessarily from the general populace, but panic and desperation from people at high levels that are at risk of being exposed and outed for who they are. And that's going to be a huge thing going on. And everything that happens is going to be to prevent that. And so just that's really what's going on. I just feel like it's going to be really hectic, really crazy. The election's going to happen. We're going to get past it. And then when we get to, and I mentioned this before, when we get to about that solstice, this is when Mars finishes up with Pluto. So that battle's kind of over. And it's also when, also when Jupiter and Saturn meet each other and cross over that threshold in Aquarius. So this is like a new age, a new energy. That 2020 energy essentially ends on the solstice. We have a couple of eclipses just before this as well, and just after Thanksgiving, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's 2 eclipses. So I think of those eclipses as kind of wiping the slate clean, and this is kind of like the new beginning. So all the hectic craziness to help prevent all this outing of higher ups suddenly stops. And it's going to confuse people that all of a sudden, I have a feeling like the virus is not going to really be with us in 2021. I could be wrong, but I just feel like there's this new, fresh energy that we exit 2020 and enter 2021 with. And then Mars is going to finish up its squares to Jupiter and Saturn as we move through January. And, that's December. But yeah, as we move through January, and there's Mars at 1 degree, so it's just about hitting Saturn, and then it's going to hit Jupiter a little later. So it's like, it's not the same energy as a square was when it's hitting them here now. From Aries to Capricorn, it's going to be from Taurus to Aquarius. And so this Aquarian part of it is very much about, the next steps, the future, looking ahead, from where we are now. And, Mars and Taurus has a lot to do collectively with like financial action and whatnot. So I think there's going to be some major financial potential, like a very positive financial potential as we enter 2021. It looks that way, and I feel like it has a lot to do with what is undone here now over the next few months. There's a massive amount of power shifting as we speak, and that's only going to intensify here. And this battle between the powers that be and the powers that ought not to be, essentially, really waging on here. So anyway, just wanted to talk about that. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Keep it relatively short. But if you have any questions, let me know. Again, this is going to be a tumultuous kind of period, I think. And as long as we can keep our heads together and sift through information for ourselves and look at it sovereignly instead of just being spoon-fed from whether it's peers or from the media or whatever. Just know your own truth. It would be my advice, because it's going to get kind of confusing here, as if it hasn't already been confusing throughout the spring and summer. But I think it's going to get really, really gnarly here, and a lot of action is going to be taken, ultimately leading to positive results, in my opinion. But that positive action is going to be strongly defended by those who are not interested in it happening. So anyway, wrap it up there. Again, Christopher Taylor, Sovereign Harmony, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.